Well, good morning, everybody. I appreciate your joining this web seminar. Today we're going to talk about things that CIOs should know about a very important topic called Web RTC. Before we do that, let me introduce myself. My name is Dr. Brent Kelly. I'm an analyst and vice president at Constellation Research. For those of you who don't know Constellation Research well, let me just tell you a little bit about us. Constellation Research is a specialty research and advisory firm where we're focused on disruptive and emerging technologies. The company was founded 3 years ago by our great analyst, Mr. Ray Wang, and unlike traditional analyst firms, our research centers around business problems rather than specific technologies. We have 9 analysts located globally, and our mission is to help our clients realize the art of the possible. And so as you see on this slide, we have a number of different business themes that we work with, including the future of work, next-gen customer experience, matrix commerce, big data and analytics, technology optimization, the consumerization of IT in the new C-suite, and the digital marketing transformation. So let's chat a little bit about disruption. And I'd like to give you a few examples. So if we think about the music industry, Apple completely turned that industry on its head when it came out with not just the music players that it had, but it also had the infrastructure behind that caused that industry to completely switch over to the MP3 format. And that caused just a massive disruption in how people listen to and enjoy music. Another disruption that most of us are familiar with is Netflix and how that has disrupted how we view and how we get digital entertainment. A third disruption would be what Android and the Android operating system has done to the smartphone market. And of course, the combination of the Apple iPhone, and then all the Android-based devices, some of the competitors that we thought we couldn't have imagined 5 years ago, like BlackBerry and Nokia, have simply almost disappeared from our consciousness. So there are some serious disruptions that can occur with the right combination of technologies and capabilities. I believe that we're going to see another very significant disruption with a capability and technology that's called Web RTC. So what is Web RTC? In a nutshell, Web RTC enables the point-to-point or multi-point voice, video, and data communications without plugins. And I say without plugins because the point here is that Web RTC is native and it is built into the browser. And so if you have access to a web browser, then you're going to have access to this capability to have voice, video, and data communications. Now, as I mentioned in this bottom bullet here, these capabilities are on the verge of becoming part of the fabric of the Internet. They will be embedded in everything we do related to how we interact and exchange information and data on the Internet. And really what is needed is simply JavaScript programming. So the idea is that the browser vendors are enabling this capability right within the browser, so there won't be plugins, you won't necessarily have to have apps and so forth. It will just be there and it will work and it will be compatible. So as we think about this idea, I'd like you just to sit back in your chair for just a minute and think about, well, if I had that capability available in my business, so for example, I know that there's vendors on the call and I know that there's end users on the call. So for you as vendors, if you sit back and think, well, what opportunities are available for me with Web RTC? There's a myriad of those kinds of opportunities that are available. Also, if you're a vendor, if you're an end user, what kind of opportunities would be available for you? And I've just listed a few that would be quickly come to mind here. So for example, if any of you have a customer service application, what would it do if you could enable that with voice, video, and data? And if it's capabilities that everybody has, so for example, if you run an e-commerce site, everybody coming to your site would be voice, video, and data enabled. there's a number of other areas where this can be of huge value. For example, with training, our day-to-day communications that we have, conferencing and collaboration, and a number of others that I list here. The point being that WebRTC can make the use of voice, video, and data ubiquitous across the devices that we have and that we carry. Now, I was asked, it was interesting, I was asked the other day by somebody, well, what is the market size, or can you estimate the market size for WebRTC? And I thought that was an interesting and perhaps a little bit of an odd question. It's kind of like saying, well, what's the market size for HTML, for example? And I really don't think of it in that way. What HTML is it's an enabler to allow us to display information and data through our browsers. Well, WebRTC is also going to be an enabler that will allow us to display voice, video, and data. Now, one of the things that I would suggest that you be cognizant of, I've specifically mentioned data today. A lot of people get hung up with the voice and the video, but it was interesting as I was chatting with somebody who is a major call center provider and was talking to them about the capabilities of WebRTC. They immediately focused in on the data capabilities and said this will be huge for our customers. And so there's lots of different ways that this data channel that's a part of WebRTC can be used for pushing information, for co-browsing, for showing what's on somebody's screen, for example, this idea of of assisting somebody with some kind of a problem. And that's just enhanced when you can add voice and video, for example, and break-fix kinds of services and so forth. By the way, if you have questions or comments, feel free to put those in the question area, and I'll respond to those at the end of this seminar. So let's talk just a little bit about what WebRTC is and how it's enabled. So think of just a basic web server that you might go to, and let's say maybe it's LinkedIn or Facebook, or maybe it's your own corporate web server, web domain that you would go to. So if you go there, you launch your browser and you point your browser to that web server. Well, if I went there also, then I would point my browser to that web server, and there would be data that's passing back and forth between that web server. Now, what WebRTC then enables, which is really unique, is that we can create a peer connection just through clicking. So, for example, if there was a listing of the people connected, you could click on me or I could click on you, and immediately we could begin sharing audio, video, and or data directly through our browsers. And I call this the triangle approach because it kind of resembles, the architecture kind of resembles a triangle between you, the web server, and me. But the key point is it's a peer connection. The data or the audio or the video is sent directly between our browsers. Typically, I would view this as kind of a single domain sort of application and way to use WebRTC. I label this slide of trapezoids because suppose that you are connected to one web server and I'm connected to another over on the right-hand side, and somehow we wanted to get together. Well, there has to be some way for these different WebRTC domains, I will say, to exchange information and exchange control data so that they can know how to interface and exchange the parameters that would let the different browsers know how to send data and information directly to one another. And so that's where we get into this idea of exchanging what I call control data between the different web servers. And this would be for multi-domain kinds of voice, video, and data exchanges using WebRTC. And for those of you who are familiar with unified communications, I'm likening this unto a familiar term that we use there called federation. This is like federating WebRTC domains. Well, it's also possible to connect WebRTC and to integrate WebRTC with, say, SIP-based domains or the PSTN. So, for example, again, if you're on the left-hand side of the slide and you're connected into the web server, well, if I'm on the right-hand side and I am connected in, say, to my PBX-based server, and that could be a PBX from Cisco or Avaya or Siemens or Alcatel-Lucent or Mitel or any of the players. Well, typically what would happen is there's going to be some kind of a border element, and I call this the Web RTC to SIP border controller. But effectively, there will probably be some kind of a border element, or at least a capability that will allow the control data and the media to flow through. Now, the reason that I say the media might flow through there is because WebRTC is encrypted by default, and I don't know of a way to undo the encryption, and so you have to have, so your audio and video, for example, will be encrypted up to the border controller, and then on the right-hand side of this slide in your SIP domain, if you do or don't use encryption, then it will flow directly to the endpoint devices like your telephone or possibly a video device like I show on the right. So this slide gives you some idea of how federation with the SIP world would occur, and there's other slides that we could show that would show how federation with PSTN and the mobile world would occur as well. So I've published a report on WebRTC, and it's called 10 Things That CIOs Should Know About WebRTC. And the things that I talk about in there are, for example, where's the money for me? And when I say for me, that means if I'm the CIO in a company, where is the money for this in me? Where's the money in WebRTC for me? And how can I leverage this? Also, if I'm the CIO, there's a discussion about what WebRTC can do for me, but there's also some comments on what WebRTC will do to you if your competitors take advantage of that and you don't. I talk about how there's going to be, WebRTC is going to disrupt our current communications industry, and when I say disrupt, it's going to take a period of time, and there's a number of different ways that that can be looked at, but WebRTC, one possible way is that it's just another channel into all of the other kinds of channels that we currently have. Some other schools of thought indicate that WebRTC will completely displace what we have today as far as PBXs and so forth. The bottom line for me is there's still going to need to be some kind of call control mechanism and directory services and those kinds of things wherever they reside and whatever you call that, whether you call that a just a call router and a directory service or something, but those still have to be there. So, but there will be some significant disruption. There will be disruption in the video industry as well. I talk about the timing of the WebRTC standard. It hasn't been released yet, and looks like we're out about a year or so. I mentioned the islands that WebRTC will create, and I do that because anybody that can do JavaScript will be able to create basically WebRTC enabled sites. And so for better or for worse, there's going to be a lot of islands created. Some of those islands can really be fantastic. So suppose LinkedIn or Facebook had this. Well, those are massive islands. There will be a lot of small islands. The point is, I've shown you in an earlier slide how you can interconnect in with other domains, how you can federate effectively with other WebRTC domains, or how you can federate with the SIP world. I talk about why Skype may or may not go away, and I think it depends on what Microsoft does here and what some of the other players in the market do here. But there's a few key capabilities that Skype provides that if somebody were able to do that, somebody big enough and powerful enough, say Google or somebody, particularly the services of directory services and the integration in with the PSTN, well, that would give Skype a run for its money. You'll read in the literature how Apple and Microsoft have not bought into the WebRTC, and I guess I'll say Microsoft opposes it as it's presently constituted for some different reasons, and I have those reasons in the report and discuss those. I also talk about how WebRTC is going to play with mobile phones and mobile devices. A couple other key points in there. I speculate on whether or not we'll see WebRTC-based form factors, or I'll say new form factors, based on browser technology with WebRTC embedded. So right now, most of you will probably have a phone on your desk. Could that phone one day be a WebRTC-based phone? We see that we have Skype-based phones now. Why not have that kind of a phone? And there's other kinds of interesting possibilities here in the device market with WebRTC. At the end of the report, I talk about 8 actionable recommendations for organizations or for CIOs to take on how they can begin using WebRTC's disruptive capabilities. So for those of you on the call who are interested, I just want to point out you can get started with WebRTC immediately. The capabilities are in the released version of Chrome. So if you have a Chrome browser and you've updated it recently, you have that already. In Mozilla Firefox, it's going to be available generally in release 22. You can get it through sort of a beta release right now. And just as an FYI, my Firefox browser updated to release 21 just yesterday, and so release 22 is going to be here very, very soon. In the report, I also list a couple of other, well, several other sites that you can go to get snippets of code, and where you can go to get stun and ICE kinds of capabilities for integrating and federating them with other websites and so forth. And there are additional resources available. So if you want to get details on the report, you can go to the Constellation website. That's constellationr.com, and you can scroll down there. If you click on research, ultimately scroll down, you can see it, or I put the actual link here. If you want to buy this report or have interest in finding more information out about that, contact our sales group. If you'd like to talk to me about your strategy or roadmap for WebRTC and or your Unified Communications roadmap, then you can contact me directly or contact our sales group. And I think with that, I'd just like to say thank you for attending, and I will now open this up for questions, and I will look and see what kind of questions that we have here. So I don't see any questions here. Okay, there's a question that just came in. So it says, is this technology ready to use? If not, how long can this take? And that's a really great question. So I mentioned the standard hasn't even been released yet. The interesting thing is I'm running across companies almost daily who have applications that are built on top of WebRTC. And so I have seen conferencing companies who have emerged, who have WebRTC-based conferencing infrastructure, and I'm not talking about just BlueJean Networks or VidTel. Both of those companies, by the way, have WebRTC enabled in their video services, but these are other companies who have audio and web and video conferencing enabled that's based on WebRTC. There's some other companies who have. I saw an exercise kind of company. It's sort of a physical therapy or kind of a remote but joint exercise class that somebody does. Anyway, I have a list, honestly, of over 70 companies who are now involved in creating either WebRTC infrastructure or who have applications that are based on WebRTC. And so the question is, how long does it take? Well, it's available now, and people are already starting to use it. Really the key, I think, here would be designing your application and then looking at some of these snippets of code to see how that would work in either Firefox or Chrome, those browsers. By the way, if you're developing for Internet Explorer, there are, the whole point behind WebRTC is to not have plugins, but there are some plugins for both Safari and for Internet Explorer, should somebody come to your site and have those browsers. So let's see if there are other questions. So the question is, what happens to usage and uptake if other browsers, i.e. Internet Explorer from Microsoft and Safari, don't adopt WebRTC, or they take a long time or add variations against the standard? So the question here really is focusing on what happens if Safari and Internet Explorer don't adopt WebRTC, or they sort of have their own standard, or they provide extensions. Well, as I mentioned, there are already some plugins that will allow WebRTC capabilities within those browsers. Some of the issues for those companies As I mentioned in the section of the report on Microsoft, Microsoft has some very legitimate issues with the Web RTC standard as it's currently constituted. Some of those revolve around specification of codecs, the video codecs that have to be a part of Web RTC, and some of it has to do with the low-line exchange of signaling parameters and so forth as to how you would set up and tear down sessions and how you would control those, I'll say, mid-flight during a call. And there's not a lot in the specification about how to do that, and so the issue is that a web developer can have whatever signaling protocol they want to have down in the low layers of their application, and Microsoft is suggesting that maybe that should change or should have some differences there. So the issues that Microsoft and some of the others have are real. They're being worked out in the standards bodies. How that's ultimately going to end up, remains to be seen. Like I say, I think we're probably about a year out. Some have even suggested that the standard may be released without a mandatory to implement video codec. And what that would mean is that the different browser vendors could then themselves decide which video they want to put in their Web RTC implementations. And so, as an example, Microsoft, I believe, and Ericsson and a number of companies actually are in favor of H.264 video. Google and Mozilla and others are in favor of something called VP8 codec for video. So, that's some of the issues that have to be worked out between the browser vendors. If nothing else, the data channel and the video and the audio channel could be released as a standard, possibly, I'm speculating now, as a version 1 of the standard. And then video as a mandatory to implement could be released maybe at a later time or in a revision of that standard. Okay. I'm not seeing any other questions up in the queue. If you have a question, please feel free to ask that. But also, I think we said that this seminar would last about 15 minutes, and we've gone over that just a little bit. So I think what I'll do is let me again thank you for attending, and there will be a blog post that contains links to this recording. Also, you can get the slide deck available, and that will be up in about 2 hours on the Constellation.com website. So it's constellationr.com, and go to content, and you'll see an area there, Web RTC webinar wrap-up. And with that, let me say thanks to everybody. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day, and I hope that this helps as you think about Web RTC and how that's going to impact the way that we engage with everybody on a day-to-day basis.